The CEO hadn't eaten in days, until a small plate of fried rice changed everything. The CEO hadn't eaten in days, until a small plate of fried rice changed everything. Ethan Blake, a man the financial world called invincible, sat silently in the back of a sleek black SUV, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights, lips cracked, fingers trembling slightly. He hadn't been able to swallow even a spoonful of soup. The doctors called it late-onset eating disorder brought on by chronic stress. Ethan called it punishment, silent, relentless punishment. "We're trying this place next, sir," said his assistant, Dylan, pushing open the door. "Not a restaurant. Just a little sidewalk stall. But there's a dish that people online say brings you back to life." Ethan frowned. A food stall? He was Ethan Blake, for God's sake. He didn't wait in line for fried rice. But his stomach churned, not with hunger, but with something unfamiliar. A flicker of hope. The car pulled up to a narrow corner shop squeezed between a dry cleaner and an auto repair place. A faded sign read, "Fuba, 10 plates of egg fried rice daily." The line of people curled down the block. The scent rising from the stall was warm, nostalgic, like safety, like home. "We didn't reserve," Dylan warned. "But maybe we'll get lucky." Ethan stepped out, drawing glances in his sharply tailored suit. He said nothing, just walked up as a small girl placed the last plate on a worn metal tray, golden egg fried rice, soft yolk shimmering, scallions crisped perfectly, steam rising in lazy spirals. "Are there any more?" Dylan asked. The little girl glanced up. Her ponytail was tied with an old scrunchie, and her smile was both polite and firm. "That was the last one." "I want it," Ethan murmured. "I'll eat it." She nodded and handed over the tray. "Eat it while it's hot," she said softly. "And please, don't waste a single grain." Ethan sat on a plastic stool nearby, hands trembling as he lifted the spoon. He took the first bite, and froze. The flavor unlocked something in him. A place long buried. A memory not of food, but of warmth. Of belonging. Of something lost and unnamed. He took another bite. And another. No one spoke. No one interrupted. The man who turned away Wagyu steaks and Michelin-starred soup now ate a plate of street-side fried rice, with tears rolling down his face. When he finally put down his spoon, there was silence. The girl stood across from him, smiling gently, not with pride or pity, just patience. Ethan looked up at her, voice raspy like it came from miles away. "What's your name?" The girl tilted her head. "Fuba," she answered. He looked at the little girl and whispered, "What's your name?" And she answered, "Fuba." He returned the next day, not as a CEO, but as a man with questions. He returned the next day, not as a CEO, but as a man with questions. No tailored suit. No entourage. Just Ethan in jeans and a sweatshirt that still smelled faintly of anxiety and cologne. He came early, before the sun had risen, and waited on a cold folding chair with his hands stuffed into his pockets. The little girl, Fuba, arrived carrying a bag of eggs in one hand and a thermos in the other. Her apron was tied crookedly, a wisp of hair stuck to her cheek. She looked surprised to see him, surprised, but not alarmed. "You're early," she said. "So are you," Ethan replied. She smiled and unlocked the small stall door, letting him stand beside her as she prepared her ingredients. Her hands moved with quiet precision, cracking eggs, heating oil, rinsing rice like she'd done it 1,000 times. No wasted movement. No need for fancy spices or flamboyant flares. Just memory, ritual, and love. "Where did you learn to cook like that?" Ethan asked after a long silence. Fuba didn't look up. "From someone who taught me to care about every bite. They said food isn't about ingredients. It's about truth." Ethan watched the steam curl up from the pan. "Did they also teach you to ration your plates? 10 a day?" "No," she said. "That part one chose. If you make too much of something good, people stop appreciating it." His lips twitched slightly. And what about people who try to buy you out? Double the price? Phuba turned off the stove and faced him. I'm not selling rice. I'm giving people something they forgot they needed. He felt that again, that jolt in his chest. Like the moment when silence is broken not by sound, but by understanding. More customers were lining up, the smell drawing them in like moths to light. Phuba stepped back behind the counter and served each person without haste or showmanship. Just a girl with a spoon, a pot, and a presence no one could quite explain. After her 10th plate was served, she put the lid on the pot. Ethan remained seated, fingers locked between his knees. May I ask something personal? He said. Phuba nodded. Where are your parents? She hesitated. Gone, she answered softly. One passed. The other left before I knew what the word father meant. His throat tightened. Phuba didn't speak again. She just wiped down the counter and started packing her things. Will you be here tomorrow? Ethan asked as she tightened the last drawstring of her rice sack. I always am. And then she paused, just long enough to study his eyes. You didn't eat today, she added. He nodded. Didn't want to take someone else's turn. I saved you a plate, she said. But only if you sit and eat it. No calls. No distractions. Just you and the food. He did. Quietly. Slowly. And again, something inside him softened. When she stood to leave, Ethan stood too. I want to help, he said. With the stall. The business. Marketing. Whatever you need. Phuba looked up, eyes steady and strange. I don't need help running the stall, she said. But, maybe you're the one who needs help remembering who you are. But, maybe you're the one who needs help remembering who you are. He came back every morning after that, always taking the last plate. Phuba didn't ask questions, and Ethan didn't offer explanations. There was an unspoken agreement between them, this was sacred ground. No boardrooms. No interviews. Just rice, warmth, and something that felt like beginning again. The crowd grew. Word spread. Locals started calling it the 10 sunrise plates. The air would buzz with quiet reverence every morning as people queued, not for fame or Instagram stories, but for something that reminded them of home. Phuba stayed unchanged through it all. She never raised the price. Never served an 11th plate. And Ethan never cut in line. On the 4th morning, after wiping the last of the soy-glazed rice from his bowl, he spoke. Where do you go after this? She glanced at the rising sun. Back to school. Then home. And where's home? A place that keeps the rain out. That's all I need. He didn't press. But his mind did. Later that day, Ethan sent his assistant on an errand. Find out where she lives, he said. Quietly. But that evening, as he waited in his car a few streets down from the stall, he saw her walk. Alone. She didn't board a bus. She didn't enter a building. She simply ducked behind a row of abandoned shophouses. Ethan followed, at a respectful distance. What he saw made his stomach twist. Inside a forgotten warehouse, behind broken pallets and tarp sheets, Phuba had made herself a home. A mat, a trunk, a kettle. Nothing else. No electricity. Just a paper lantern and a row of carefully folded clothes. Her rice sack, secured with a silk ribbon, sat like treasure in a shrine. She hadn't noticed him. She sat with her back to the wall, unpacked a small box, and gently removed a jade pendant. The same pendant she wore sometimes, but rarely displayed. She held it to her chest and whispered something he couldn't hear. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he arrived early. Before even the birds. When Phuba came around the corner, her steps slowed as she saw him waiting by the stove. You're early again, she said. I wanted to help. She frowned. You already offered. I wasn't ready then. He peeled potatoes as she beat the eggs. They worked side by side, no music, no noise except the sizzle of oil and the soft rhythm of preparation. By the time the line formed, something in him had changed. He wasn't hungry for food. He was hungry for clarity. As he took the last plate, she smiled. Still just you and the rice? He looked at her. Really looked. And noticed something he'd missed before, her eyes. Brown, with a ring of hazel around the edge. Like his. His hands shook slightly. Phoebe noticed. You okay? She asked. Yeah. Just tired. He walked away that morning with more than a full stomach. He walked away with suspicion blooming in his chest like a storm cloud. Back at his apartment, he pulled out an old photo album. There, beneath a layer of dust, was a picture of a woman he once loved, briefly, tragically. A woman who had vanished before he ever knew she was pregnant. And around her neck, the same jade pendant. He stared for a long time. Then whispered, "No. It can't be." He returned the next morning, but this time, he didn't come for the food. He returned the next morning, but this time, he didn't come for the food. Phoebe was already heating the oil, her motions fluid and practiced, but something in her froze when she saw him standing there, no tray, no usual casual posture. Just him, holding an old photograph in both hands like it was fragile porcelain. She raised an eyebrow. You're not hungry? I have questions. Phoebe stiffened. You're not the first. He slowly stepped closer, holding out the picture. In it, a woman in her 20s smiled under the same spring cherry tree that shaded Phoebe's stall today. Around her neck, the jade pendant. I knew her, he said. A long time ago. Her name was Anya. Phoebe's eyes darted to the picture, then quickly back to the stove. I don't know that name. Then who gave you that pendant? My mother, she said quietly. Your mother is? She passed when I was 6. Her voice was steady, but the edge of it could cut steel. I remember her face, not her name. He looked at her for a long moment. Did she ever tell you about your father? No, she said, then turned to flip the rice. And I never asked. She said he left. The words hit him like a punch to the ribs. Ethan stepped back. Behind them, the morning queue began to form. Phoebe glanced at the line, took a deep breath, and plastered on the small smile she gave everyone. Sorry, she said gently. The 10 plates are about to begin. Ethan didn't move. Let me help. She hesitated. Then nodded. They worked in silence, their rhythm strained. The sizzle of garlic and oil was interrupted only by the clink of ladles and the soft murmur of early customers. By the time the 10th plate was served, Ethan hadn't said another word. Phoebe hadn't looked up once. But then, just as he began to leave, she spoke, without turning around. She hummed when she cooked. The same way I do. It helped her forget things. He froze. She cried at night, Phoebe added. She didn't think I noticed, but I did. And every time she opened that little box with the pendant, she smiled like she was somewhere far away. Ethan turned back, throat tight. Do you have a picture of her? She asked, still facing away. He handed the photograph to her. She took it gently, as if it might vanish, and stared. Her fingers trembled, her eyes glassed over. Then she sat down, right there, in the alley beside her stall. I remember that tree, she whispered. I remember sitting in her lap under it. I didn't know there was a picture. Ethan crouched beside her. I looked for her for months. She disappeared before I even knew she was pregnant. I thought he abandoned us, she said. That's what she told me. I never knew, Ethan said, the words escaping in a breath. If I had. She didn't reply. For several long minutes, they sat quietly. The world kept moving, the street bustled, the wind carried the scent of scallions, but in that moment, father and daughter stayed still in the eye of the storm. Then her voice returned, soft and hollow. "Why did you come here in the first place?" "I don't know," he said truthfully. "I couldn't eat. Nothing tasted right. Until your rice." "That's not just rice," she said. "It's hers. Her recipe." They locked eyes. And for the first time, she smiled, not the polite one for customers, but something softer. "Wounded. Real. I want to know you," he said. "I don't know if I want to know you yet," she replied. He nodded, accepting. Then she stood, dusted off her apron, and turned back to her little stall. "You can come back tomorrow," she said, voice steady. "But no questions. Just eggs and rice." He smiled. And nodded again. "You can come back tomorrow," she said, voice steady. "But no questions. Just eggs and rice." On the fifth morning, he brought her something wrapped in velvet, the restaurant deed from her mother's name. On the fifth morning, he brought her something wrapped in velvet, the restaurant deed from her mother's name. Phoebe was slicing green onions when he arrived, but her eyes immediately narrowed at the sight of the soft burgundy pouch in his hand. "What is that?" she asked, not unkindly, but not gently either. Ethan stepped forward and laid the bundle gently on the wooden counter, beside her rice bowl and chopping board. "It belonged to your mother. And now, it belongs to you." She wiped her hands on her apron before touching it. Slowly, as though it might vanish if she moved too fast, she pulled open the velvet fold. Inside, on aged parchment stamped in ink, was the original deed to a restaurant called Anya's Table. Phoebe blinked at the name. "That was the restaurant we dreamed of opening together," Ethan explained. "Before she left. Before everything fell apart." Phoebe traced the faded letters with one fingertip. Her voice was almost inaudible. "Why give this to me now?" "Because it's yours," he said. "Because it always was." She looked up at him, confused, wary. "This doesn't fix anything." "I know," he said. "But it's something," she whispered. They worked quietly through the morning rush. Ethan didn't take a plate that day. He stayed behind the stall, fetching ingredients, wiping trays, offering change to customers while Phoebe handled the stove. They moved with quiet coordination, not quite father and daughter, not quite strangers. After the 10th plate, she untied her apron and looked at the deed again. "Why keep it all these years?" "I never could bring myself to let it go," Ethan admitted. "It was the last thing I had of her. I thought I'd open it one day. For her. For us." He paused. "Maybe now, for you." Phoebe's fingers curled tightly around the paper. "I don't want your pity." "This isn't pity," he said. "This is legacy." She stared at the deed for a long time, then finally looked up at him again. "I can't accept this unless I earn it." "You've already earned everything, Phoebe," he said softly. "You just don't realize it yet." That afternoon, after the crowd had gone and the pots were cleaned, Phoebe did something unexpected. She invited Ethan to walk with her. No talk of fathers or daughters. Just a quiet walk through the side streets of the city where she'd grown up alone. They passed a weathered building with a boarded-up storefront. The faded sign above still read, "For lease." "That's where Mom used to take me to peek through the window," she said. She said one day, we'd open something here. Her dream. Ethan stepped forward and cupped his hand against the dusty glass. "You still want to cook for people?" he asked. She nodded. "But on my terms. Small. Intimate. Real." He smiled. "That's exactly what a legacy should be." A breeze swept down the narrow street, and Phoebe closed her eyes. "I don't know if I forgive you yet," she said. "I'm still figuring that out." "You have every right to. But I want to see if there's something worth rebuilding." Ethan turned to face her. "There is," he said. "And we don't have to call it family. Not yet." But we can call it a start. For the first time, she didn't argue. As they stood quietly in front of the shuttered dream, a woman from across the street called out to Phuba. The girl who makes the rice. Are you opening a shop here? Phuba glanced at Ethan, then back at the woman. She glanced at Ethan, then back at the woman. Not yet, she said. But maybe soon. Phuba's voice was soft, but her words echoed across the quiet street like a stone dropped into still water. The woman smiled and waved before heading back into her store. Phuba turned to Ethan, the corners of her mouth twitching upward, but not quite into a smile. He didn't press. They walked back in silence, side by side. That evening, after dinner service, Phuba laid the deed flat on the counter, weighing it down with a spoon. She stared at it for a long time before speaking. If I were to open something, she began, I'd want it to be near the school. Small, but with space for kids to sit. A place for mothers to eat without rushing. Ethan nodded slowly. You've thought about this. For years, she admitted. But dreams like that? You bury them when rent's due. He leaned back against the fridge. What if I helped? No strings. Just, investment. I don't want your money. It wouldn't be money, he said. It would be belief. And a bit of restitution. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. So now you're paying me to forgive you? No, he said gently. I'm just tired of letting good things die. They didn't settle the question that night. Phuba left with her hair still tied up and the deed tucked under her coat. Ethan sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot where she'd stood. The next morning, something changed. Phuba arrived before sunrise. She didn't speak. Just rolled up her sleeves, tightened her apron, and got to work. Ethan joined her without a word. Together, they served 20 plates that morning, 10 more than usual, and she let him watch as she cracked the eggs, measured the broth, adjusted the flame. At midday, a man in a suit came by. He held a briefcase and wore a gold pin on his lapel. Phuba narrowed her eyes as he approached the stall. I'm looking for Miss Anya's daughter, he said, scanning the space. Who's asking? She replied, voice level. I represent the Culinary Preservation Board. I understand there's been talk of reviving the Anya's Table brand. Phuba froze. What? The man smiled politely. We keep tabs on legacy brands with cultural value. Your mother's recipes, they're still spoken of in certain circles. Ethan stepped beside her. We're not ready for any official partnerships. Of course not, the man said. But if and when Ms. Phuba wishes to proceed, we'd be honored to assist. He handed her a card and left with a nod. The weight of what he said didn't fully land until hours later, when Phuba held the card under the kitchen light. I never told anyone her name, she whispered. Ethan looked up. Word travels. She ran her thumb along the card's edge. Or someone's been watching. That night, she did something she hadn't done in years. She cooked an old family dish, one her mother used to make for birthdays, red bean rice with salted fish and pickled daikon. She served it to Ethan without a word, watching his face as he took the first bite. He paused. I haven't tasted this in 20 years, he murmured. Neither have I, she replied. They ate in silence. For the first time, the space between them felt less like a chasm and more like a road, long, cracked in places, but still walkable. As she cleared the dishes, Ethan reached into his coat pocket. There's one more thing, he said. He slid a small leather-bound photo album across the counter. Phuba hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos of her as a baby, in Ethan's arms. Her mother in the background. Her first birthday. Her first apron. Dozens of moments she'd never known were captured. She flipped to the last page and saw a faded Polaroid. Her mother, holding her, and Ethan standing just behind with his hand on both of their shoulders. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, were the words, "For our little chef, your table will always be yours." That night, she slept with the deed under her pillow. It wasn't superstition, just something about the weight of it, the promise of it, made her feel like maybe her mother's spirit was still somewhere close. Phoebe lay on her side, knees tucked, listening to the night sounds of the city filter through the cracked warehouse wall. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel cold. The next morning, she arrived at the lot early, not for the rice stall, but for the storefront she and Ethan had visited. The old "For Lease" sign was now hanging askew, and in the dusty front window, someone had written "Sold" in chalky white letters. Phoebe's heart skipped. She pushed the door open. It creaked like an old hinge stretching after decades of sleep. Ethan was already inside, sleeves rolled up, sweeping the floor. "I used the deed as collateral," he said before she could ask. "Don't worry. The name's still yours." Her throat tightened, but she only nodded. By noon, the plan had shape. Phoebe would close the morning stall and put everything she had, every penny earned from those 10 precious plates, into this place. Ethan promised to stay behind the scenes, quietly funding the remodel, letting her run the kitchen her way. Still, old wounds didn't close overnight. That afternoon, as they examined the cracked tiles near the stove, Phoebe asked, "Why didn't you come for me when she died?" Ethan set the toolbox down slowly. "I didn't know," he said. "She never told me she was sick. Or that she had a daughter." Phoebe looked at him with quiet disbelief. "I found out 2 years later," he added. "Too late. And by then, I didn't know where to start." "You didn't look." "I did," he said. "But I looked in the wrong places. I was ashamed." She didn't respond. They worked in silence after that. But it wasn't cold. Just unfinished. Over the next few days, the space transformed. Old brick exposed. New wiring installed. Phoebe chose dark walnut for the counters, soft lights for the booths, and kept one wall bare for a mural she planned to paint by hand. A tree, like the one her mother used to draw for her. Roots deep, branches wide. One evening, after they painted the final base coat, a soft knock came at the open door. It was the suited man from the Culinary Preservation Board again. "I heard you're opening soon," he said, stepping into the entryway. Phoebe narrowed her eyes. "We haven't told anyone." The man smiled. "Good food has its own network." He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal invitation, the city's Rising Table Gala, a prestigious event for new chefs rooted in heritage cuisine. "I don't want a spotlight," she said, handing it back. He didn't take it. "You may not want it, but you deserve it. You honor your mother's legacy whether you intend to or not. That deserves to be seen." Ethan stepped beside her. "She'll think about it." After the man left, Ethan held the envelope between them. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know," Phoebe replied. "But maybe I should." 2 days before the restaurant's soft opening, Phoebe stood in the empty dining room holding the deed again. This time, not for comfort, but for clarity. She called out to Ethan, who was tightening a cabinet hinge. What was her dream, really? He looked up. To feed people. With love. Without needing to impress anyone. She exhaled. "Then that's what I'll do." And when she finally tucked the deed away, not under a pillow, but into the new safe behind the counter, it felt like closing the lid on a box that didn't need to be carried anymore. She stood in the quiet kitchen, inhaling the scent of fresh wood and future memories. Then, without warning, someone knocked at the side door. A small knock. Quick. Nervous. She opened it slowly. A girl stood there. 8, maybe 9 years old. Ragged clothes. No shoes. Eyes too wide for her tiny face. "Is this the place with the rice?" the girl asked. "Mama said it used to be." Phoebe crouched, her voice soft. "It will be again. Tomorrow." The girl's stomach growled. Phoebe didn't hesitate. She walked her into the kitchen, set a pan on the stove, and cracked 2 eggs. As the oil hissed and the rice began to brown, she felt her mother's voice in her chest again, "Feed the ones who need it most. That's your table." The girl sat at the corner stool, feet swinging, eyes glued to the pan. And when she took her first bite, she didn't speak, just smiled like the sun had come up inside her. The ribbon cutting was quiet, just how she wanted it. No press, no camera crews. Just neighbors, regulars from the old stall, a few kids from the nearby school, and Ethan standing beside her with a shy smile and a pair of mismatched scissors. The red ribbon fluttered as she cut it. Inside, the smell of freshly steamed rice and miso broth filled the air. Handwritten menus lined the counter. On the wall, the mural was complete, a wide branch tree with a dozen tiny bowls blooming from its limbs. Her mother's apron, faded and patched, hung in a small glass frame beside the register. "Welcome to Little Table," she said to the room. A murmur of applause followed, but Phoebe barely heard it. Her heart was beating too loudly. The little girl from before, the one with no shoes, was the first customer. She wore new sandals now, still too big, and her hair had been brushed into 2 neat braids. She gave Phoebe a gap-toothed grin and slid a dollar bill across the counter. "1 egg rice, please." Phoebe smiled. "Coming right up." Ethan manned the drink station, pouring barley tea and cleaning trays. Every time she looked over, he looked like someone trying to earn his place, like a man walking beside his past without pretending it never happened. Midday, a woman entered in a crisp navy suit. She wore sunglasses, but Phoebe recognized her immediately. It was the food critic who had once written about Anya's table when Phoebe was still in grade school. The woman ordered nothing. She simply walked the space, touching the wood counters, pausing at the mural. Then, quietly, she slipped a folded napkin onto the counter before leaving. Phoebe opened it. The soul returned. "Your mother would be proud." Her throat caught, but she blinked away the tears. By dusk, the last customer had gone, and the floor was covered in crumbs, laughter, and stories. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You did it," he said. "We did," she corrected. Later that night, after locking up, Phoebe walked back to the counter and ran her fingers along the edge. It was smooth and warm. "Real. I didn't think I'd ever feel full again," she said. "Me either," Ethan replied from behind her. "Not until I sat at this table." She turned to face him. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. "But it'll take time." "I know. I don't need a father," she added. "But maybe I'd be okay with a friend." He smiled. "Then let's start there." They stood in silence for a moment, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound between them. Then Phoebe picked up 2 bowls and set them on the counter. "One for me," she said. "And one for the man who finally learned to eat again." He laughed, a real one, warm and unguarded. As they ate, the mural behind them glowed faintly in the low light, the branches reaching higher than she remembered painting them. The next morning, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a jade pendant, nearly identical to the one her mother once wore. Beneath it was a note, scrawled in looping script. "Legacies find their way home. Wear it when you're ready." She held the pendant in her hand, cool and solid. Then she looked up at the sun rising through the front window. Home, she thought. And she smiled.